Hello everyone, welcome to another Why No One Uses video. In my last video about Alert, which you can find in the description by the way, you may notice when I was talking about stealth killers, I completely forgot about Myers. You'll have to forgive me about that, because you see, I haven't seen a Myers in months, and, well, I tend to forget about him a lot. It's a tall white dude with a knife wearing a mask. We have like 3 of those already in the game, so please forgive me if I forget about one of them. To compensate for all you Myers Sims out there, however, I decided the next perk I will talk about is our favorite speed perk, Play With Your Food. Before I continue ranting about Play With Your Food, I have an important announcement to make. I have created a Patreon page. One of the biggest issues I have when it comes to making Why No One Uses videos is trying to choose which perk to talk about, because they are either something everyone is interested in knowing about, or they are like Predator, no one really cares. With my Patreon page, you will have a lot more control over what you're interested in seeing, along with being able to support me in making more content. There's currently a poll free to everyone who visits the page, and they will be able to choose the 100 subscriber reward that is planned to come next month. Hopefully. You don't need to pay money, because I will continue making content regardless, but it would be very nice of you. You can find the Patreon link in the description. Okay, enough with the self-promotion, time for what you've been waiting for. Play With Your Food is a perk that belongs to Michael Myers, otherwise known as the Shape, and it can be unlocked on his Blood Web at level 35. Play With Your Food is known to pop its head out every once in a while, either to be funny and be a part of some silly build, or make a certain build work. We will always remember you, Smallface. How the perk works is somewhat easy to understand too. Whenever you start a chase with the Obsession and leave them alone, the perk grants you a token up to a maximum of 3. Each token grants you a speed boost of 3, 4, or 5% per respective tier. This means that at tier 3, if you gain 3 tokens, you're giving yourself a 15% speed boost, and that is not something to laugh about. Being able to change a killer's move speed is incredible, and it can make certain loops almost impossible for many Survivor players. However, the perk has the downside of losing a token whenever you perform any action that can damage a survivor, such as through basic or special attacks. Even missing an M1 can cause you to lose a token, so be careful when you swing, unlike this silly sausage over here. There's also a cooldown period of 10 seconds on the perk, which controls how quickly you can gain tokens from the Obsession. This, in my opinion, is rather long, and I will talk about this later in the video. As you may have expected from the title, I believe this perk does not get as much attention as it deserves, and I want to raise the reasons why this perk tends to not be so popular. Before we discuss the problems, let's set some ground rules. The Rancor video still torments me to this day because of all of the comments saying, I use this perk or I see it sometimes. These kinds of comments are nice to hear because this shows that I'm actually wrong about certain perks and they are seen somewhere in DBD. This, however, does not mean that these perks are constantly used. Many of the perks I talk about in the series mainly use meta perks as reference points. I like to use the quote, why is this perk considered meta, and why is the one I am talking about not, when I'm working on my videos. DBD, just like every game, will have a meta, and we have seen that with how prevalent the cursed perk existed. So just because you may see a perk I talk about in the series, I mainly focus on why it's not used more often, especially compared to certain things. Okay, let's look at the first problem with the perk now, that being it is slow to build up. You need to first locate the Obsession, and then you need to start a chase with them, and then end it as soon as possible. This means you're starting and ending chases at most 3 times the gameplay with your food's full value. This can take some time, not only because of the 10-second timer, but also because ending chases can either be fast or feel like it takes forever, since behavior still hasn't made up their mind if you're chasing the survivor through the wall or not. I blame you for this. This may feel like a nitpick, however, you have seen how fast gens can blow up, at least before the mid-chapter patch. So, wasting your time for the speed may end up feeling pointless for most players. This, however, can be offset by using information perks, such as Lethal Pursuer, which is great to find the Obsession as quickly as possible. The second problem with Play With Your Food is that it is much easier to lose tokens than it is to gain tokens. The perk is designed so whenever you perform an action that can hurt the survivor, you will lose a token, even if the hit was missed. The only killer who does not follow this ruling is the Plague, who can get full use out of the perk. This is because the green puke is not registered in DBD as a damaging ability, rather it kind of does its own thing, like a special attack. This means that you can get away with silly builds on Plague with your food, such as Lightspeed Plague. Outside of Plague, of course, if you were to use Plague with your food on any other killer, you will just need to be more careful with how you use your abilities, which leads to our third point. The third and final problem needs to be split in two in order to keep things easy to understand. The first section will focus on how Play With Your Food interacts with other builds, while the second section focuses on how it works with killers. Firstly, Play With Your Food is strange. Okay, maybe not that strange. This is a perk that, although good, needs a lot of setup to get its value out, such as Nemesis to change your obsession on the fly, or Lethal for the reason I mentioned here. The perk can also be used alone, but then it begins to feel weird. Normally when people make builds for either survivors or killers, they tend to focus on something specific. A good example would be with the Locker build for survivors, including the perks Head-On, Quick and Quiet, Deception, and Inner Strength. Inner Healing. This build focuses on lockers to their fullest, allowing sneaky killer stuns and deceit, and maybe a quick heal if you are lucky. In comparison, Play With Your Food focused builds don't really work well as builds like these. These builds typically are ready to initiate and do their actions on the fly, but Play With Your Food needs more setup, and like Problem 1 stated, it is slow to build up. Okay, let's look at the killer cast. Since killers all have different playstyles and abilities, there are bound to be killers who are not interested in the perk. Killers who have high mobility, like Nurse, Blight, and Hillbilly, have no need for the perk since their powers already give them enough speed. Out of all the fast-moving killers, Wraith is probably the only one who has interest in Play With Your Food, since his mobility is in the form of move speed. Regardless, Wraith players tend to prefer other perk options, such as Slowdown and Chase perks. Killers who have range, such as Huntress, Deathslinger, and Trickster, lose their tokens much faster than other killers due to their powers, so it's not really their favorite option. Lastly is everyone else. It is okay on many of the M1 casts, especially on Scratched Mirror, Myers, and Plague. However, many of the killers tend to run perks that either fix their problems or prefer typical slowdown. This leaves us with a perk that is slow to build up, fast to lose its power, and has trouble combining well with several killers in their builds. This, however, does not mean the perk is bad. In fact, I still think the idea of Play With Your Food is good. Being able to increase your chase power using a certain survivor feels like a mini-game within the game, and when it works well, you feel rewarded. That, however, does not mean this perk cannot get a change or two. Play With Your Food is a perk that overall can be left alone. It's not suffering enough to get any drastic changes, however, I do have one change I would like to make to Play With Your Food in order to make it feel more smooth. I would reduce the timer after exiting a chase by 2 seconds. Not only do you have to deal with wacky spaghetti code when it comes to if you're in a chase or not, but sometimes you may accidentally leave the chase earlier than intended, wasting more time. By making this change, it just allows the collection of more tokens to be smoother in the long run. Overall, Play With Your Food is a decent perk that could have some minor improvements, but it is still a fun perk to run, and one of the most unique in the game. And with that, we are done. Shout out to Wendy Duval, who was the mad lad to figure out Play With Your Food was the next perk. Also, don't forget to check out the poll set up for the 100 subscriber reward. A simple thank you does not feel like it is enough for all of you guys for what you have done for me on this channel. So I want to give a small but nice reward as a real thank you. Good luck in your games, everyone. With this new meta, you definitely will need it.